Most people remember A.P.J. Abdul Kalam as India's people's president, the gentle face of science, hope, and national aspiration. They remember the silver hair, the calm voice, the school visits, and the strange, powerful image of a head of state who seemed less like a career politician than a teacher who had somehow walked into the presidential palace. But that image came at the end of a much longer journey. Long before Rashtrapati Bhavan, before the missiles, before the awards and the reverence, Abdul Kalam was a boy from Rameswaram, born on October 15, 1931, into a modest family in Tamil Nadu. His father was a boat owner from a once wealthier family, and Kalam grew up as the youngest of 5 siblings in circumstances that demanded perseverance more than comfort. That beginning matters because he did not rise through dynasty, inherited office, or party machinery. He rose through study, engineering, service, and the rare ability to turn private discipline into public trust. What changed everything was that his own dream and India's dream slowly became the same dream. He was drawn to flight, technology, and the future. India, still young and still trying to define its place in the modern world, needed exactly that kind of faith and capability. Before Abdul Kalam became a beloved national figure, he was a child on the edge of the sea, learning that distance could be crossed, limits could be challenged, and greatness did not have to begin in the center of power. The real question in his story is not how he became famous. It is how a boy from a small island town came to embody the technological ambition of a nation and then carry that moral authority all the way to the presidency. Rameswaram gave Abdul Kalam his first education in humility, faith, and discipline. He was born in a town shaped by religion, pilgrimage, and the rhythms of coastal life, and from early on he learned what it meant to live without excess while still holding on to dignity. Britannica notes that he persevered with his education despite impoverished circumstances, and that perseverance became one of the deepest patterns of his life. He was not a child formed by glamour or by the expectation of easy ascent. He was formed by effort, by routine, and by the sense that education could become a way out not only for one person, but for a whole country still trying to build itself after colonial rule. This is the emotional force of Kalam's childhood. He was not running away from his origins, but carrying them forward. The modesty, simplicity, and restraint people later admired in him did not appear after fame. They were already there in the beginning, shaped by the town, the family, and the discipline of a life where every step had to be earned. Yet there was also imagination. He was not content merely to remain where he had begun. Somewhere in that coastal world, the dream of flight took hold. That dream matters because it gave his life direction before it gave him status. He would go on to study aeronautical engineering at the Madras Institute of Technology, but even before that formal step, the essential movement had already begun, from shoreline to sky, from local life to national purpose. Before Abdul Kalam became the scientist the country would celebrate, he was a young man proving to himself that modest beginnings did not have to limit the scale of one's ambition. In his case, the discipline of childhood did not narrow the imagination. It made the imagination durable enough to survive difficulty. The next transformation came through education and technical formation. Abdul Kalam earned a degree in aeronautical engineering from the Madras Institute of Technology, a step that turned a youthful attraction to flight into a disciplined professional path. This was the decisive shift from dream to method. He was no longer just a bright student from Tamil Nadu hoping to do something meaningful. He was entering the world of engineering at a time when India urgently needed people who could translate vision into capability. After graduating, he joined the Defense Research and Development Organization in 1958, and from there, his life began moving toward the institutions that would define modern India's scientific and strategic ambitions. In 1969, he moved to the Indian Space Research Organization, where he became project director of the SLV-3, the first satellite launch vehicle both designed and produced in India. In 1980, that vehicle successfully placed the Rohini satellite into near-Earth orbit, pushing India's space program onto the international stage. This was not just a technical success, it was a psychological one. For a post-colonial nation, long measured against the capabilities of larger powers, the launch symbolized something bigger than engineering. It showed that India could build, test, and achieve at a level that demanded global recognition. Abdul Kalam's rise during this period was unusual because it combined expertise with symbolism. He was not merely one scientist among many, he was becoming the face of a national possibility. The idea that science could be a path to sovereignty. What changed everything was that his work increasingly stood for more than his own career. He became part of India's argument with history, part of its insistence that technological self-reliance was not a luxury, but a form of dignity. Before the country knew him as a national icon, Abdul Kalam was a scientist proving that complex dreams could be built piece by piece through engineering, teamwork, and stubborn belief. The boy from Rameswaram had not abandoned the horizon. He had found a way to push it outward for an entire nation. If the space program made Abdul Kalam visible, the missile and strategic programs made him legendary. After rejoining DRDO in 1982, he planned the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, which led to a series of important missile projects, including Agni and Prithvi. Britannica identifies Agni as India's first intermediate-range ballistic missile and notes that it drew on aspects of SLV-3 technology, a reminder that Kalam's career did not move in disconnected chapters. The engineer of launch vehicles and the architect of missile systems were the same man, carrying forward the same logic of national capability. In 1998, he was one of the chief coordinators of the Pokhran-2 nuclear tests, an event that solidified India's status as a nuclear power and made Abdul Kalam a national hero to many Indians, even as the tests caused anxiety internationally. By then, his public identity had expanded far beyond the laboratory. He was increasingly known as the Missile Man, and later as the People's President, two nicknames that reveal the rare dual quality of his reputation. He represented hard power and public affection at the same time. That combination is almost unheard of. Technical experts often remain distant from popular imagination, and political figures often borrow scientific prestige without genuinely earning it. Abdul Kalam was different. He had credibility in the institutions of defense and space, but he also had the moral simplicity and communicative warmth that allowed ordinary people to feel that he belonged to them. He wrote books that became household names in India, including Wings of Fire, India 2020, My Journey, and Ignited Minds, and through those writings, he turned scientific achievement into a broader message about national development, discipline, and possibility. What changed everything in this stage of his life was that the scientist became a symbol. India no longer saw him only as an engineer of systems. It saw him as a carrier of aspiration, someone who seemed to embody the idea that a technically strong India could also be a morally purposeful India. Before Abdul Kalam entered the presidency, he had already become something rarer than a successful scientist. He had become a figure the country could trust to represent both achievement and hope. That is why his final ascent felt so extraordinary. In 2002, after years of scientific service and growing national popularity, Abdul Kalam became the 11th President of India. Britannica notes that he served from 2002 to 2007, while the official presidential profile emphasizes his focus on transforming India into a developed nation by 2020. The move from scientist to president might have seemed unlikely in another country, but in Kalam's case, it felt almost inevitable in retrospect. He had already become a national conscience shaped by technology, self-discipline, and service. Yet the presidency did not erase what had made him distinctive. He did not suddenly become a conventional political operator. He remained, in the public imagination, a teacher-statesman. He spoke often to students. He encouraged young people to think about science, innovation, and the future of the country. He carried into the highest office the same simplicity and seriousness that had marked him from the start. This is what makes his life so powerful as a full arc from childhood to greatness. Abdul Kalam did not enter public memory as the son of power. He entered it as the son of modest circumstances who made himself useful to something larger than himself. He built rockets, then missiles, then a national language of aspiration. He showed that scientific achievement could become public moral authority, and that public moral authority could rise all the way to the presidency without becoming hollow. Yet the beauty of his story lies in the fact that even at the top, he never seemed fully consumed by office. He remained identified with books, classrooms, and young minds more than with ceremony alone. That is why his legend endures so strongly. Before A.P.J., Abdul Kalam became India's people's president. He was a child in Rameswaram, a disciplined student, an aeronautical engineer, a builder of launch vehicles, a steward of missile development, and a man who turned national dreams into practical work. That was his making. Not the march of inherited power, but the rise of a life built through study, service, and the belief that a nation becomes great when its people dare to imagine beyond their starting point. After the presidency, Abdul Kalam did something that made his story even more unusual. He did not retreat into ceremony, bitterness, or the quiet prestige of a finished life. He went back to what seemed closest to his real identity: teacher, guide, and believer in the future. By then, he had already held one of the highest offices in India. He had already become a national icon. But what gave his final years their emotional power was that he never behaved like a man satisfied with having arrived. He kept writing, kept traveling, kept speaking to students, and kept returning to the same question that had followed him from Rameswaram to the laboratories and then to the presidency. What kind of country could India become if its young people believed in building it? Britannica notes that after leaving office in 2007, he continued to lecture and remained widely admired, while his official profile emphasizes how deeply he stayed connected to education, innovation, and the dream of a developed India. That is what makes Abdul Kalam's ending so different from the endings of most powerful lives. Power did not harden him into distance. Prestige did not turn him inward. If anything, the later years made him more recognizable as the person he had always been beneath the titles. A man who believed knowledge was meaningful only if it lifted other people. He was still speaking to young Indians not as a ceremonial elder handing down empty encouragement, but as someone who genuinely believed the future could be engineered through discipline, imagination, and moral purpose. His message never separated science from character. He did not talk about national greatness as vanity. He talked about it as responsibility. On July 27, 2015, Abdul Kalam collapsed while delivering a lecture at the Indian Institute of Management, Shillong, and was pronounced dead soon afterward from cardiac arrest. The detail has become part of his legend because it feels so perfectly aligned with the life he had built. He died not in retirement from the world, but in the act of teaching, still trying to leave one more idea behind. Britannica records that he collapsed during the lecture in Shillong, and the official memory around him has only deepened the image of a president who remained, to the end, a teacher first. And that is the final shape of A.P.J. Abdul Kalam's story. Before he became India's people's president, he was a boy from Rameswaram chasing flight. Before he became a symbol, he was a student, an engineer, and a builder of national capability. And after he had already reached the top, he chose not to live like a ruler looking backward, but like a teacher still looking ahead. That may be the deepest reason he endured in public memory. Abdul Kalam did not just rise. He kept giving himself back to the future.